3. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. About a week ago, I think it was last Sunday, September 30th, I did a video where I talked about these underground DC tunnels that connect this Masonic Lodge in Washington, DC to basically the Capitol Rotunda building, the Federal Reserve, the White House, and numerous other buildings, and the type of satanic pedophilia, pedivore type of stuff that's been going down there for years. And when I originally did that video, the gentleman that I interviewed, he didn't want me to use his first or last name. He wanted to remain anonymous. And his fiance, Amy Berger, was the one that granted me the interview last week that so many of you were very blessed by. And I know some of you have even asked me to put you in touch with her, and she's been in touch with some of you guys, and it's been a really positive experience. Well, since that point, Aaron reached back out to me through Amy. Actually, Amy let me know first that he really wanted to let himself be known. So it's Aaron, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Is it Golub?
Golub, yes. Golub.
Okay. So
yes.
Aaron Golub, and he's the one who, as a young boy, experienced all this stuff that basically was going on in these tunnels beneath Washington, D.C. And so I just want to start off, Aaron, if you could just sort of like what I started off with Amy, is just kind of, and I know a lot of this stuff is still very murky and hard to process because it happened so long ago and there was so much MK Ultra programming that you went through, but just to the best of your ability, sort of give us some background and describe, what happened as a small boy and as you grew older.
Well, as I said, a lot of these things took place, with a lot of heavy drugging and hypnosis. I wasn't very aware as a child because of the trauma, but I did my best to try to figure out what was going on. So that being said, I grew up in a multi-generational satanic family. I was born in New York City. Both my parents were professionals in New York City. We later moved to Long Island, New York. My grandfather, he was a employee at one point for NASA. He actually worked with the Nazis that were brought over here from Project Paperclip. And unfortunately for me, that put me in proximity to all their mind control operations. I was with these people, these Nazi scientists and my grandfather for a very long time. I was also taken to satanic rituals in between MK Ultra Monarch programming sessions. So there are some details of these experiences that I remember very well. And like with a lot of survivors of SRA, there are these huge gaps in my memory. There are weeks and months of my life growing up that I have no recollection of to this day. And even though I've been healing actively from this since 2006, when I first started to have these memories, there's still much information that I don't yet recall. And sometimes I get little pieces of information that are very telling. Other times, like for many of us, I question whether or not any of this ever happened. So I grew up in this satanic family. Both my parents were involved in SRA. My grandfather, in addition to being working with NASA, he was also a satanic high priest in the Long Island, New York area. So I witnessed a lot of terrible things. It seems like upon recollection that there were people being killed almost on a weekly basis. My mom and my father divorced when I was 3 years old. My mom married another guy in the cult, and that was when the ritual abuse, the satanic ritual abuse, became much more extreme. During this time, my grandfather, who was this high priest, my sense is that he didn't want to be in the cult anymore, and he basically left town overnight to get a job as a professor in Illinois, and that left me unprotected. I think my grandfather, to some degree, in his own way, was trying to protect me from the worst of these things. But I remember just a lot of horrific rituals, a lot of people being raped, tortured, killed. My mom's second husband was involved in the production of snuff porn, of child pornography. He used me on at least one occasion to lure children from a playground into a van in which I remember at least one of these children was later used in child porn and then executed, murdered in a satanic ritual. I know that happened at least one time, probably more, but there was one specific memory that I can't seem to get rid of. My mom divorced her second husband in 1976, I believe. I'm not exactly sure of the exact date, but he had killed our dog in front of us, little dog. We had gone away for the weekend, and the dog had apparently had an accident, either in the living room or the kitchen, and my mom's second husband took a kitchen knife out, and the rest I don't remember, but I know that the dog was killed. That apparently woke my mom up to the fact that she was with this person. She really had no knowledge on a conscious level that she was still involved in a satanic cult. And she divorced her second husband. At that point, I had a lot of difficulty in school, a lot of special needs classes, a lot of difficulty learning and processing. The teachers saw there was something wrong with me. The social workers were contacted. They attributed that to just the general dysfunction of my family. You know, my dad was an alcoholic. He had been arrested a number of times. My mom was addicted to Valium and other drugs. So the dysfunctional behavior in my family and the difficulty I experienced growing up was attributed to just the normal dysfunction. And so they kind of were aware that I had problems, but they didn't have any idea about the ritual abuse, the SRA. So basically, since then, I've struggled a lot in life. I made it through high school. I did fairly well toward the end of high school. I suffered a severe depression when I was 18 years old. I was hospitalized for depression. Unfortunately, the hospital that I went to was an affiliated hospital that was also involved in the anti-ultra program. So I started to get memories of ritual abuse, and they gave me a lot of drugs and electric shocks to erase that memory, those memories that were coming up. This is when I was 18. I ended up getting out of the hospital after a few months. And basically from 18 until my mid-30s, I went from a series of dead-end jobs, waiting tables, flipping burgers, washing dishes. I read a lot of spiritual books. I walked a lot. I prayed a lot. But I couldn't seem to really get a handle on my own life. I also had no memory of any trauma other than just growing up in like a typical alcoholic family. In 2000, early 2000s, I started to become really active on the internet. I started researching VID, and I come across several survivor sites that were talking about SRA. I ended up spending a lot of time researching SRA just out of curiosity. Wrote a lot to these websites and commented a lot on their content. A woman in early 2000 named Rebecca, she reached out to me through this website. She said that she was a survivor of SRA and that she was Christian, and she would love to talk with me more about some of the comments I had about survivors having a lot of resilience. And she also needed some help. So I became friends with her online. I joined several internet groups for SRA support people on Yahoo back at the time. And within a few months, I was actually asked to run a group for Christian SRA survivors. And I come from a Jewish background, and I didn't think I went through any ritual abuse myself, but I wanted to help them, so I did. And I ended up running this group for several years, running other groups after that. And I wanted to become more involved and more connected to survivors, but I didn't know how to do it. One of the women in my groups, who I'd known for a long time, suggested I attend. There's a Smart News conference in Connecticut once a year for survivors of ritual abuse. I attended that conference in 2006. During the first day of the conference, I was happy to meet people, and I talked a lot to people that I had met online. During the second day of the conference, I remember I started having a lot of difficulty breathing. I started getting a lot of headaches, a lot of dizziness, a lot of nausea, and I had to step aside. I had to go to my hotel room and rest for an hour or two because I just felt so out of it. I thought that maybe I was coming down with the flu or something. But I went back to the conference midday. I started experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of really deep dread, a lot of deep apprehension. And I started at that point to get flashbacks of ritual abuse that I went through in this daycare center. And then at that point, I realized that I was a survivor of SRA. I also, within this same day, started getting memories of very strange psychological testing when I was a child that involved being given certain pills to take, being drugged, having electrodes placed on me. I thought there was some kind of sexual abuse, but it didn't make sense to me, so I dismissed that. But I started having a lot of these memories of MK Ultra. Within a couple hours of these memories, I started to have these very strong suicidal impulses come into my mind. I just felt that I'm supposed to kill myself now. So I looked at this. I realized it was programming from MK Ultra, from Monarch programming, and then I was able to not act on this and basically calm myself down. So since 2006, I've been in and out of therapy. I've continued to run groups and participate in groups for SRA survivors. I'm very active in the survivor community, and I'm right now just trying to, make more sense of my life. I'm trying to have some better quality of life. I met my fiance Amy over 8 years ago. She's also a survivor of SRA, and both me and her have turned out to be a really good team in terms of not only supporting one another, but for me, giving me a reason to live. I'm pretty sure if I weren't in a relationship, I probably would have killed myself several times by now. But because of somebody else who loves me and cares about me, I haven't done that. And me and her have also been a team in terms of trying to reach out to other survivors and really just get the information out there. So I'm a little tired. I'm a little kind of punchy right now, but I'll do my best to answer your questions. Before I just wanted to once again thank you for the work that you're doing. I know you're receiving a lot of criticism. There are a lot of trolls online saying all kinds of incorrect things about you and other people. I just wanted to encourage you not to get discouraged. And also for you and for other people who may be watching this, this stuff can be very overwhelming, very difficult. Our brains are not set up to handle information about torture, rape, and infant cannibalism. And so this stuff can really do a number on you. And so, for you and anybody else who might be watching this and learning about these things, please take good care of yourself. And please, it's more important to walk away from the computer, from the TV, give yourself a break and time to heal than it is to try to learn as much as possible. It's better off for all of us if the people who support us are strong and healthy and not too overwhelmed. So I just wanted to put that out there. And feel free to ask any questions that might be on your mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And totally agree. And that's also why I try to, if I do a really heavy video, I try to make the next video more of just sort of just a positive one. Like I'll read maybe an encouraging email I got, or I'll talk about some positive development with what's going on in the SRA movement as it relates to what Trump's doing or things like that. So yeah, definitely good advice. And I want to just tell everyone out there too, if you're going to get into this type of war where we're exposing this type of stuff that needs to be exposed so that it can be stopped, it's so important to be covered in the blood of Messiah, get your head in his word and just get filled with the Spirit and just really be in that, because if you try to get into this battle and you don't have that, Satan's going to just basically rip you up and spit you out.
Yeah.
So it's just really important to be walking and have an intimate relationship with Yahshua, because it can be, otherwise it's very, very difficult. So Aaron, I wanted to ask you more. So essentially it sounds like as you were growing up and they were, blasting your brain and doing all this stuff at the psychiatric wards, I mean, it sounds like they were trying to basically convince you that you were insane, that these memories and these thoughts shouldn't even be in your mind. And they were going to eradicate it because they're basically accusing you of making it all up and that you're insane. Is that kind of what they were trying to do to you?
Well, in terms of what they try to do, they tried to disorient the victim as much as possible. So I was always given heavy amounts of drugs, LSD, other types of hallucinogens during and after the abuse, combined with electric shocks. The electric shocks were designed to reinforce trauma, and also I received a lot of electric shocks in the back of my head, which erases long-term memory. So they were doing whatever they could do to disable me. And for reasons that I believe had to do with my grandfather and him trying to protect me, they weren't able to kill me. Otherwise, they probably would have. It would have been less work for them to have done that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Right. So, do you have any memories, because, you're describing these tunnels, do you have any memories of you with a group of kids, or you yourself being actually taken beneath, like, say, the Capitol Rotunda, where we know senators and House of Representatives get serviced by little boys and little girls? Do you recall?
Well, one of the memories I remember was underneath the Fed. There's some kind of satanic temple or something specifically underneath the Fed where they do like high-level rituals. I remember that. I don't remember one under the Capitol or any of the other buildings. There's something in the Pentagon that they do as well. But the tunnels were just a way of getting people around. They traffic in children, they traffic in women. Women who serve as politicians are called presidential models. They're trained specifically to be sex slave to politicians and members of, back in the day, members of the military and other people. So the tunnels that go into the Capitol and the White House and the other government buildings are just used to hide all this stuff. I remember being under the Masonic Lodge. The Fed has something, the Capitol building. I don't remember the White House or the Pentagon, but I've heard other people describe similar things.
Right, right. So what are, can you name some of the more familiar or big names of politicians that you did see?
Big names, okay. A few people that I remember specifically, I mentioned Hillary Clinton.
Right.
I remember Hillary Clinton a long time ago, probably mid-70s. That's the earliest memory I had. She was obviously a lot younger then and not a political figure.
Right.
A woman that I used to know on internet groups said that maybe I was hypnotized to believe that Hillary Clinton was at these rituals. And I said that would have taken a lot of work because Hillary Clinton wasn't anybody who anybody knew anybody about. She was unknown during the time that I remember her.
Right.
But I remember her very clearly being involved in infant cannibalism and sacrifice. Jeb Bush, I remember seeing Jeb Bush at these rituals. Once again with the Bush brothers, I just got a personal sense that they weren't completely purely evil, that they had some good in them. Some people might disagree with me, but they're, as I said, I just feel some kind of compassion toward them, less so for the father. Earl Wheeler, I had mentioned to you in the past. During the time that he was at these rituals, I believe he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He helped to run and organize the logistics around the drug trade, smuggling heroin from Vietnam to this country. I remember him wearing a bright purple, shiny satin robe. That was the color of robe he had. It was a purple satin robe. Another gentleman I remember was a guy named James Jesus Angleton, who was also he was a former CIA director. If you look at pictures of James Jesus Angleton, he looks like a really evil guy. He just has a very very sinister way about him when I remembered him. Mitt Romney's father was somebody that I recall in passing, but I don't have enough solid information on. I don't have enough of a solid memory to really tell you exactly when and where I remembered him. Senator Robert Byrd, I remember back in the early 1970s. He didn't interact with me or abuse me in any way, but I saw him. He was like some kind of satanic high priest. Another few people, John Ashcroft, who was Bush W's Attorney General. I remember him. I remember Senator Leahy from Vermont also being present. At least on 3 separate occasions, I saw him. Those are the general people that come to mind when I ask this question, and I generally receive more information as I see more of these people on television.
Right, kind of triggers additional memories for you as you see these people. Yeah, I know with your remarks regarding George W. Bush and Jeb Bush. I mean, obviously, they were born into that family because of their father.
Yeah.
So evil. So I'm sure even back then when you saw them, they were probably a little bit not as corrupted. I do know, though, as they've grown older, I've had a couple different sources verify that George W. Bush actually goes beneath the tunnels of the Vatican and participates and watches the Pope basically do cannibalism of babies and ritual sacrifices and things like that, and he participates in them. So I think probably at this point in his life, he probably has become as evil as his father. Maybe not back in the 70s when you saw him, but that at least that's my sense. I don't know if any of these people have the ability to repent because of just all that they've been. I mean, I can't even, like what you were saying earlier, I can't even wrap my mind around not only raping a baby, which is horrific enough. I can't even, but then to eat the baby after that, it boggles my mind. And it's almost, I mean, I think to the average American, it's incomprehensible. It really is.
It's incomprehensible to me, and I've seen these things.
Yeah.
I still don't get it. You know, our minds as human beings are not equipped to deal with this.
Right. Right. So I wanted to ask you, you know, obviously, what specific ages were you when you were in these tunnels? I know you were very, very young. What were the ages approximately?
Well, what were the ages? I would say from ages 3 to age 7.
Okay.
That's my general take on that, and a couple other people. I remembered the previous Pope Ratzinger, seeing him in some ritual somewhere, not necessarily in D.C.
Right.
So I remember him a long time ago, and also Cardinal Law, who used to be the cardinal in Boston. I remember him seeing him in at least 2 rituals growing up during the satanic abuse. I wasn't heavily involved in Vatican ritual abuse, but there is crossover, and I did see some of these figures from time to time.
Right. Right. Okay. So I asked you when we initially talked a week or so ago, if you could just go ahead and explain to the audience, why is it, again, the difference between how they weren't going to kill you, but they do cannibalize and kill a lot of these other babies. You did a really good job explaining that to me, and I just want to give you the platform to go more into that.
Why? Okay, so you're asking me why I was spared and where other people weren't.
Right, exactly.
Okay, mostly, generally speaking, people who grow up in these families have the inherited ability to dissociate. Dissociation is a hereditary attribute that's passed on genetically, and so people who are born into these families tend to dissociate very easily, and they during these rituals, they often don't remember anything of what's going on. And they're not much of a threat to these systems, to these groups of people, because they're traumatized so much that they really almost never recall the information. If they do, it's usually too late, meaning that years have passed and they're usually people who have a lot of problems in life. So they're much less of a threat. These families tend to keep the children that they have for the next generation of cult members. The children like myself who resist are usually given more torture. And as I said, with a lot of us, and one of the reasons I have maybe some sympathy towards some of these people is because you're tortured from day one. Often in the womb, you're tortured with electric shocks and drugging of the mom while you're in utero. And so you don't even have a fair shot at life once you're born. So it's difficult to make a choice as to whether or not you wish to choose God or choose Satan. So these people aren't given a choice. That being the case, I somehow feel that I had some kind of spiritual protection from God or something that prevented me from being killed. Generally, the people that these cults tend to kill are babies and young children that they receive from social services. Catholic Charities is very heavily involved in smuggling of children for both for child pornography, sex trafficking, and ritual murder. Save the Children organizations, Child Protective Services. There are a lot of bad guys in Child Protective Services just looking to have any excuse to pull children out of families. And these families, once they lose their child, these children are often abused sexually in satanic settings. And these children are expendable. A lot of times if a woman gives her child up for adoption, there's no way of tracking that child because they're running the adoption agencies.
Right.
And it's just much easier to kill one of them than it would be for someone like myself or another person growing up in the cult who has a birth certificate and everything else. It does happen, but a majority of the children that they use for ritual sacrifice are outside of these family structures.
Right, right. Talk a little bit more about what was the name of the conference again in 2006?
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
Oh, what was the name of the conference in 2006?
Oh, it was the 2006 Smart News Ritual Abuse Conference. Smart News Ritual Abuse Conference in Connecticut.
Okay.
It's run by Neil Brick. He's been tirelessly advocating for ritual abuse survivors for more than 20 years. He grew up on a Masonic ritual abuse background from Massachusetts, and he's usually pretty responsive to emails. So there's a whole library of information, of articles on his website that one could research. And he's usually pretty responsive if you want to try to get a hold of him via email to ask questions or to get information.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think people need to understand there's a lot of resources out there,
Yeah,
especially now that are coming to light through like the gentleman you just mentioned, these conferences. Fiona Barnett has a huge wealth of information, especially when it comes to the MK Ultra programming and deprogramming. Can you talk a little bit more about when you were at this conference and you really started getting these flashbacks? Did the people that you met or the setting that you're in, I know you're going through a lot with the headaches and the nausea and everything, but did you feel like you had a good support group to kind of help you as this started happening to you right there at the conference?
well, it was interesting. I mean, kind of difficult part of the conference was I recognized at least 3 of the people in the conference from the cult.
Wow.
And I didn't feel that they had any kind of sinister motivation. I think they were just like me trying to get some help.
Right.
But I posted on my group. I used to run a group on the internet, And I told all these people who I'd known for many years in some cases, who were ritual abuse survivors, said, "Hey, guess what? I happen to be an SRA survivor. I guess this is contagious or something." And I had so much support around me. I had been emailing therapists for years, exchanging information about SRA and support systems. I became really connected to a number of different Christian organizations that had supported ritual abuse survivors. And so I let all these people know that, I'm not just an advocate, I'm also a member, so to speak. And I had a tremendous amount of support. And I was able to just to have people back me up very quickly. So I was fortunate in that I knew a lot about this stuff, and I knew a lot of people already who knew me well enough to give me some supportive information and some encouragement.
Right. Very good. Very good. So I wanted to ask you a similar question to what I asked Amy, and that is, what do you personally do to continue with your healing? And I mean, Amy mentioned, her writing and and the different things that she tries to do to get her mind in a positive framework. Do you have types of things that you do now?
Well, I try to do a lot of physical exercise. I do a lot of swimming, hiking. I do yoga. I do meditation. I do a lot of work with groups of people. I run several groups online for ritual abuse survivors. I also spend a lot of time just healing and processing trauma, just through walks, through reading a lot about other survivors, their experience. I try to be somewhat encouraging to people because I have healed a lot, especially recently. And just on a side note, on Thursday afternoon, I was watching one of your videos, and you'd kind of alluded to the person that wanted to remain anonymous. And when the idea of speaking to you came up, I felt a lot of fear come up in my body, and a lot of resistance. And at that point, I realized that this is the fear that I was holding on to was obstructing me, was causing a barrier between me and what I wanted. It was separating me. And I realized at that point that whether or not I wanted to go public, I needed to go public for my own growth. And I also felt that I need to be a voice to the people who didn't make it, people who I knew growing up who were killed, people I know online and in person who deal with feeling suicidal, who are hopeless, whose every single day is a struggle. I felt that I need to speak on their behalf, and that whatever shyness I feel, I need to face head on. And I also just want to say that growing up in a satanic family, I was used a lot in child pornography, in snuff films, in those kinds of things. And so the idea of being filmed and being on video is extremely triggering to me. It's very, very uncomfortable for me to be doing this, but it's part of my healing to be doing it anyway. So when I realized I had a lot of fear around speaking with you on video, I realized it was something that I had to do, both for myself and for those who I wish to be their voice. And this is healing for me. This is a big part of my healing, being able to say and speak things that were unspeakable, and being able to say things that I've kept to myself my whole life.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad it's healing for you. And just so you know, it's healing for the people watching. I lost count how many people, after Amy gave her interview, how many, particularly women, who let me know that even though they were not SRA survivors, they had been abused. They had been victims of pedophiliism just in their respective families. And they told me that as Amy was giving her testimony, they literally would start just breaking down in tears, and it was so healing for them to hear Amy share what what she had gone through and how she had overcome. So it caused a lot of good in just the subscribers that I have. And so I feel confident that the same thing's going to happen with your testimony. So it's not only healing for you, but it's healing a lot of people out there who may not have gone as deep as you guys in terms of the SRA, but still, you know, I think we know pedophilia is probably a pretty major problem going on even in everyday America. And it's something that's got to stop. It's got to stop. We can't live in a nation like this where our children are being treated this way. You know, it's amazing that, you know, you and Amy have gone through just such traumatic experiences, and to see, it's so neat to see how he's led you both together to support each other, and how he led you like to that conference to really get this initial healing and everything. What are your goals or perspectives on the future in terms of what you hope to see with, as more SRA victims are coming out and Americans seem to be more aware of what's going on? What are some of the things you're looking for?
Well, a couple things. You know, I also wanted to speak because a vast majority, 90+% of SRA survivors that are active online tend to be women, tend to be female. There are very few men out there. There are some, but it's mostly women that come forward. It's mostly women that I see in these groups, and it's very rare to see other men who are trying to heal from SRA in the public domain or even on any of these internet groups. So I wanted to try to reach out to them. There's a male, somebody who's been violated every which way you can, and that it's okay to get out there and tell your story. It's okay to acknowledge the suffering that you survived. Regarding the general public, you know, I watched your video about the Boy Scout leader being a pedophile, and you know, the thoughts that I had when you had mentioned that the leader of the Boy Scouts was a pedophile was, of course, the Boy Scout leader is a pedophile. Organizations like the Boy Scouts have always had this kind of creepy energy around them, and I always felt that there was something going on there, but didn't have any hard evidence. And one of the things I was talking with Amy about today, I talk about with Amy a lot, is that these satanic organizations and these individuals exist within the mainstream of our society. You know, they're running the Boy Scouts, they're church leaders, they're members of the community, they're civically involved, they're Freemasons, members of the PTA, Lions Club, Rotary Club, you name any kind of mainstream organization, and you'll find these pillars of the community types who are often in leadership positions who are involved in these really horrific things. So one of the things that I feel is important is that society as a whole needs to stop looking the other way. I live in suburban Boston, and in the Boston area specifically, we've had a lot of information about the Catholic Church, about cardinal law and all the sexual abuse that's taken place within the Catholic Church. It was front page news for many years. And naming these priests who have been complicit, who have been convicted of pedophilia, being named publicly. And yet, you know, when I wake up and I drive around on a Sunday morning, I see all these people lining up to go to Catholic Church. And not only did they line up to go to the Catholic Church, but they send these kids, they send their children to Catholic schools. All these wealthy people with good jobs and nice cars line up every morning and drop their kids off at Catholic schools where there's a high probability of sexual abuse, knowing that this stuff has been out in the public for many years. And until that comes to an end, this stuff is just going to continue. So I'm not terribly optimistic about the general public being shocked and outraged about this information. I feel that the general public is deliberately looking the other way. I'm more focused on reaching out to people who have gone through these things, to fellow survivors, to give them a little bit of hope and encouragement, and also to those of you like yourself, Daniel, who would like to help us out. because SRA survivors really need all the help we can get. So I'm really just trying to preach to the choir right now. And the general public, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't want to know about this for their own reasons.
Yeah, there's definitely been a sleepiness on the topic, and even just a total ignorance of it. I guess maybe I'm a little bit more hopeful than you, because I do see things changing in that it's, at least on the internet, it's becoming a lot more, the topic's becoming discussed a lot more. And I hope that trend will continue. I really hope that this really, especially with my understanding of Trump and hopefully his seriousness in tackling this issue, because as you've clearly shown by the people that you saw as a young boy, I mean, this is not just a Republican or Democrat issue. This cuts across all ideologies and the entire political spectrum. So it's obviously a problem that affects both sides of the aisle politically. It affects obviously a lot of different religions and people. I guess I'd like to just sort of conclude the interview by just asking you a little bit more about, you mentioned the SRA survivors that you wanted to help, and you mentioned that even earlier on, before you even had the breakthrough in 2006, that you were an admin on a forum. And I remember you telling me when we talked a couple weeks ago that you were an admin on this forum, and you didn't even realize that you were this SRA survivor. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, as I said, it was kind of interesting because this woman, Rebecca, who unfortunately took her own life several years ago, had reached out to me. And she was the one who really was a catalyst for me wanting to learn more about ritual abuse and specifically connect with a Christian support group. So they were originally very helpful to me. As I said, I come from a Jewish family, and I haven't been terribly religiously inclined for most of my life, but I feel like I was placed in this position, and it was very interesting. And I remember I would be reading a lot of prayers and posting a lot of prayers. I found Christian organizations that were very helpful to me in terms of how to understand this stuff. And I felt very healed by it, interestingly enough. Like, oh, this is interesting. I'll pray for the healing of my soul, deliverance from evil. I'll do this for me too, even though I haven't gone through any of this stuff. It couldn't hurt. And so I felt a lot of healing, through Christ, through Jesus and God, while I was running these groups, before I had any knowledge of my own background as a ritual abuse survivor. And I also feel like, I feel like God really put me in a really ideal position in some ways. Running groups, going to conferences, reading all these books. I have a 20 book list on Amazon on ritual abuse and all these things. I had all this stuff set up. And then lo and behold, guess what? I happen to be a survivor too. It was a very shocking moment. I was caught completely off guard by it. I did not see it coming. Of course, there were people in my group who probably suspected I might be a survivor, and they were less surprised than I was. But I feel very blessed and very lucky that I was able to have such a handle on the material before I realized that it was something that I experienced on a direct way. Because a lot of the programming, a lot of the suicide programming comes up around getting memories. Usually after a ritual or after a programming session, there's a type of hypnosis that takes place in which you're told to kill yourself if you have any recollection of that memory. And so, having read about this from other accounts and read on books and online, when I started to get my own memories and started to feel these suicidal impulses, I was able to dismiss them. It was somewhat of a struggle, but I had somewhat of an understanding to back it up. And I'm like, it's not going to work on me. I figured out the game. And so I was able to keep walking through these experiences.
Again, it's incredible to me how much your testimony matches up with people that you've never even met that go through the same thing. Exactly what you described is what Fiona Barnett and Sarah Ashcraft said, that they would start getting the memories and understand what had happened to them. And then there would be like this trigger of urging them to commit suicide, to kill themselves. Yeah. And it was a really powerful urge to do so. And they would have to overcome that. And I think this is why probably we see many SRA survivors who did commit suicide or kill themselves, because of that MK Ultra programming that was inserted into them. When you start seeing such a multitude of testimonies corroborating each other from people all across the world in different time periods, I mean, at some point, it becomes such a preponderance of evidence that any court of law would validate you guys. And to me, it's just horrific that so many people try to discredit people like you guys and Fiona and Sarah and all these discredit you when you're the survivors. You're the ones that we should be praying for and helping to heal and supporting. I mentioned to you in an email that my hope is I really would love to see a memorial set up for SRA survivors that did not survive, that were the victims, and have a memorial like we see, memorials to other types of, like military memorials that we have, and the Holocaust Memorial and all these. Well, why not one for SRA survivors? That would be pretty incredible, I think. But Aaron, I just want to thank you so much for doing this interview. Even though I know the difficulty of the fear and everything, I'm just so grateful. And I know you're saying it's healing for you. I know it's going to be healing for a lot of people watching this. And I'm sure there'll probably be subscribers just like with Amy that are going to reach out to me and want me to put you in touch with you. And do you have a way that you want people to, I know Amy mentioned her Facebook. Do you have a way that you'd like people to reach out to you?
I would say the best way to reach out to me would be just to comment under the video. Okay. I don't know who's watching this. I want to be able to vet people before I add them on Facebook. Sure. So if people are interested, feel free to comment below the video, and I'll do my best to keep up on getting back to you. I'd also, I just want to say one thing in closing here. I wanted to, I'm here on behalf of the people that I know who didn't make it, the people I saw killed growing up, the people that I saw growing up who now may be a part of the cult, who I was friends with in school. I want to say that I'm here for my friend LJ, SRA survivor in London who committed suicide several years ago. My friend Rebecca, who committed suicide several years ago. Or any other ritual abuse survivor who hasn't found any support or love and struggles with ending their life every day. For people in my groups who continue to struggle, and also for people who are out there who are still being abused, who are in totally hopeless lives. I really hope that that some healing, that some love can come to them, and that they could find some peace and comfort at some point. And once again, I wanted to thank you for your efforts, Daniel.
Amen. Just you saying that, I'm just going to close with some prayer here. Yasha, we just pray for these victims, these survivors, that you would bring healing. Suicide is not the answer. And we just ask that you would please begin to heal the multitudes that are just in this nation, and not even mentioning the ones all across the world. We need this healing. These people have been through enough, and we need justice too. We need this to be stopped. This has got to be stopped. It's been continuing on generationally. And we just ask, we cry out as a nation, as a people, please, we don't want this happening anymore. We want to throw ourselves at your feet. We know you're the answer to everything. So please intervene on the behalf of the SRA survivors that are out there. We love you so much, Joshua. Amen. Amen. All right, Aaron. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for watching. And again, be patient and be tender and loving. He'll go through the comments and respond as he will. But again, make sure that you are being very respectful. Otherwise, I'll be very quick to ban people and to remove comments if I see any abuse going on. So, all right. Thank you, Aaron. And God bless you guys. Shalom.
All right, Daniel, you have a good night. Thank you.